Hi, I'm She Knows, and I had a question for you. And my question is simply this: can you tell the difference between if you have a cold or radiation poison? Or are you that person that is in so much fear from the lies and the snares from all our many, many enemies? The ones that automatically, talking about doctors, etc., where they automatically say, "Oh, you have the C word." And so then we run to the high for all my old subscribers. You know what the high is. You run to the high and you believe the paid people, the doctors, the nurses. And I say paid because they get paid XYZ hundreds of dollars for every shot they give you and your family. So those are the paid people, aka the K people. The K word that rhymes with vanilla. Ha! Mm. When they do nothing to your body, they probably only listen to your heart, take your general vital signs, and they do nothing. But then they say, "Oh, you have the C word." Well, for the most part, we all are already familiar with the symptoms of a cold and the so called flu and the so called flu symptoms, which they created as well. And the further I research, the more I'm starting to connect the dots. The flu has some of the same things that this bio weapon, the C, huh, jabby jab, has in it. But anyway, that's just from my research. Do your own. Radiation symptoms are headaches, hmm maybe a cough or not. And if it is a cough that's dry, for the most part, and it's more like a cold detailed symptoms. hmm All our lives, America has been describing and detailing and expressing these same symptoms. Why is it that you don't know that something is off? Something is different. Something is not right. Something is wrong. All our lives. You get a cold, you get a head cold. You know the difference between a head cold, a sinus infection that's triggered by a cold. You know the difference. So why are you believing? Well, let me move on. However, at any rate, you guys are being told that you have the C word. And unfortunately for you, you believe them. Why? Because they have a PhD or MD, or sometimes not a D at all, just an M. Go look that up. And sadly, we believe them. I never could figure out for the life of me, since this whole fake demi has been going on, why so many of us just don't research. We just don't. And I don't know why. You research Beyonce birthday, when her and Jay-Z supposedly got married. You should have kept on going and figure out if they was clones or not. They were for years. Ever since that, you ready, B? Yeah. But anyway, moving right along. This ain't even about them. And it can't be about them because they gone. But anyway, let me move right along. Honestly, guys, we're dying. And honestly, we don't even realize it. That our doctors are setting us up so that they can get this for every shot that they give. Okay? And you tell your doctor your symptoms. I know I do. They be like, oh, well, we're going to write you out a prescription. I say, wait, hold up. You write me a prescription for, and I be just like that. For, and they be like, oh, we're going to write you out a prescription because, it look like you're nasal. Hold on. Nasal? Child, I told you that my ear hurt. What do you? Oh, well, the ears and the nose and the throat is connected. Yes. I know about the oncology and the entology and all the ear, nose, and throats. Honey, my children had surgery on their ears when they was little. So tell me something I don't know. But we don't question it. But anyway, let me move on and keep on going. So you tell your doctor your symptoms, and they're cold like symptoms. You just feel bad. Sometimes you have a cold and it's just bad. It just rub you the wrong way. And the symptoms that you describe is such as a cold. And then some might say diarrhea, nauseator, runny nose, etc. And this is coming from just me, you know, my thoughts, and my research, you know, and my personal experience. My mama used to say, she knows two things happen when you grow old. You either get old and dumb or you get old and wise. I'll take old and wise, Alex, for 300. Just 300. But anyway, that is my experience, my thought, and from my research. And for those who don't know, She Knows has been in the physical therapy area for 2 years at a small 16 years old. For 2 years, learned a whole lot. And also, she was a pharmacy technician. I got not only to smell the drugs that I was counting, I got to learn about it. And see, I didn't have to learn about it, but that's just who I was. I wanted to know what this drug was and what did it do. That's why I don't take them. I got bags and bags and bags and bags and bags of them upstairs. I don't take them because I know what they do. But anyway, moving on. Uh, that's just my research, my personal, and my, knowledge of knowing what's going on. But please, I want you to please make no mistakes about radiation. Radiation is real. And guess what? It's here. And I can feel it. What say you? Let's see. Let's see. Let's see just what we can learn on this situation right here. Well, we just found out real quick that it was an acute sickness. Mm-hmm. Bear with me as I adjust the screens so that everyone can see and everyone can hear. Hold on. You get to see my beautiful face. That should be good enough. Y'all don't mind the top of the wall. That's white. Because we need to know these things because it's a real thing. Here we go.
With an unprecedented war raging in Eastern Europe and the prospect for nuclear war being higher than it ever has been for our generation, It's imperative that we have a plan to deal with this horrifying worst-case scenario. Although we would hope that the possibility of this remains low, we must be ready to deal with the literal fallout of a nuclear war. In this video, Dr. Joe Alton has returned to provide instruction on what to do if the bombs drop, how to minimize radiation exposure, and how to manage radiation sickness. Links for the Survival Medicine Handbook, as well as personal protective equipment, will be in the description below. So let's get to it.
Okay, let's discuss the medical effects of radiation exposure. These are collectively known as radiation sickness or acute radiation syndrome.
Shout out to Canadian Prepper.
Certain amount of radiation exposure is tolerable over time, but your goal as medic is to shelter your group so they receive as small a dose as possible. To accomplish this goal, we should first describe the different terms for measuring the quantity of radiation. Scientists use a variety of confusing terms such as rads, rems, sieverts, becquerels, grays, and curies to describe radiation amounts.
Rads is the worst one.
The amount of radiation being given off by a source, the total amount of radiation that's actually absorbed by a human or an animal, or the chance that a living thing will suffer ill effects from being exposed. Becquerels and curies, they describe the amount of radiation that, say, a hunk of plutonium gives off into the environment. They're named after the scientists who were the first to work with and die from radioactivity. Rads represents the amount of the radiation in the environment that's actually absorbed by a living thing. Some use the term gray similarly. 100 rads equals 1 gray. Rems and sieverts, they're the measurement of the risks of health damage from the radiation
I
absorbed.
experienced this.
For our purposes, let's use rads. Rads
The worst one.
Radiation absorbed dose. And as I mentioned a second ago, measures the amount of radiation energy transferred to some mass of material, typically human. An acute radiation dose is one received over a short period of time. It's the most damaging type of exposure. For comparison purposes, we're going to assume that the average person absorbs about 0.6 rads per year from natural or household sources. You might not have symptoms until you hit 30 to 70 rads.
But it all turns to cancer.
At that point, you might notice a mild headache or nausea within several hours, but recovery is usually rapid. At 70 to 150 rads, nausea and vomiting is seen in about a third of patients.
I experienced this
increased susceptibility
often.
to infection occurs, but eventual recovery is the usual outcome. At 150 to 300 rads, moderate nausea and vomiting happens in a majority of patients. Fatigue and weakness is experienced by about half. Infection and or bleeding may occur
I experienced
due to
that.
the immune system. Burns may be seen and medical care will be required by many. Expect occasional deaths at the high end, 300 rads of exposure. At 300 to 500 rads, expect moderate nausea and vomiting, fatigue and weakness in just about all victims.
I experienced that.
Stools, dehydration,
Same thing.
appetite, skin breakdown, infection, they will be common.
Yep.
Hair loss is also visible in most over time.
Me
At the high end
too.
of exposure, expect at least a 50% death rate. At over 500 rads, well, it's not good. Spontaneous bleeding, fever, stomach and intestinal ulcers, bloody diarrhea, dehydration, low blood pressure,
Yep.
infections, hair loss, all this stuff is anticipated in almost all patients.
Yep.
And death rates begin to approach 100%. All the effects related to exposure may not happen at the same time, aren't immediate in many cases. Hair loss, for example, may take 10 to 14 days to appear. Death often occurs weeks after exposure. Be aware that if you're knocked off the grid, modern medical care is not an option. Worse outcomes than what I've mentioned are going to be the norm. The treatment goals for radiation sickness are to prevent further radioactive contamination, treat life-threatening injuries like burns and trauma, reduce symptoms, and manage pain. First is decontamination. Decontamination lowers the risk of internal contamination from inhalation, ingestion, or open wounds. This involves removing radioactive particles. Removing clothing and shoes eliminates about 90% of external contamination. Gentle washing with soap and water removes additional radiation particles from the skin. If you have group members with radiation sickness, you're going to have to treat the effects. Things like headache, fever, diarrhea, nausea and vomiting, dehydration, burns, sores or ulcers, bacterial infections, and of course pain. Medications include pain meds antibiotics, antidiarrheals, anti-nausea agents, burn gels, and dressings. All these are important to have. Materials to provide daily wound care, they're also important. And also potassium iodide. Potassium iodide, available commercially as ThyroSafe and other brands, is also used. This is a non-radioactive form of iodine. Iodine is essential for proper thyroid function. If you're exposed to a significant radiation, however, your thyroid will absorb radioactive iodine, radioiodine, just as it would other forms of iodine. That would lead to certain cancers down the road. If you take potassium iodide, it prevents the absorption of radioactive iodine. Potassium iodide is most effective when taken as soon as you're aware there's been an exposure. Treat the children first because they're most likely to end up with cancer later on. Treatment for older kids is ThyroSafe 65 milligrams a day for up to 10 days. Although if radiation levels are no longer an issue, you can stop the treatment. Adults take 130 milligrams a day for up to 10 days.
That's 3 drops.
And dosing for small children and pets, we discuss that further in our survival medicine handbook. Let's talk about prevention. The medic's goal is to prevent exposures over 100 rads. A radiation dosimeter is a useful item to gauge radiation absorbed. It's much more useful than a Geiger counter, in my opinion, and it's widely available commercially. This item helps predict the likelihood of developing radiation sickness. Now, there are 3 basic ways of decreasing the total amount of radiation exposure. First, limit time spent out in the open. Radiation damage is dependent on the length of exposure. Leave areas where high levels are detected and no adequate shelter is at hand. The activity of radioactive particles decreases over time after 20.
Well, in my case, it's inside. They're pumping it from underneath, inside.
4 hours, levels usually drop to about 1/10 of their previous value or even less. Second, increase the distance from the radioactive source. Radiation disperses over distance and the effects will be decreased in proportion. In nuclear reactor meltdowns, common evacuation patterns include a
Hi, I'm Kit, and this
ten-mile circle, or sometimes a keyhole consisting of a several-mile circle and an additional 3 miles radiating from the direction of the prevailing winds. The third way to shield people is to decrease radiation where they are. In many cases, people are going to have to shelter in place. Shielding will decrease exposure exponentially, so it's important to know how to construct a barrier between your people and the radioactive source. Denser materials will give better protection. Shielding effectiveness is measured in terms of halving thickness. This is the thickness of a particular material that will reduce gamma radiation, the most dangerous kind, by
Gamma.
When you multiply the halving thickness, you multiply your protection. Here are the halving thicknesses of some common materials. Lead, 0.4 inches or 1 centimeter. Steel, 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. Concrete, 2.4 inches or 6 centimeters. Packed soil, 3.6 inches or 9 centimeters. Water, 7.2 inches or 18 centimeters. And wood, 11 inches or 28 centimeters. Now, what does this mean from a practical standpoint? Let's take concrete as an example. The halving thickness of concrete is 2.4 inches or 6 centimeters. That barrier thickness of concrete will drop exposure to gamma radiation by half. Doubling the thickness of the barrier to 4.8 inches or 12 centimeters drops it to 1/4, 1/2 times 1/2. Tripling it to...
So what he's talking about is putting a barrier between you and the fluctuation of the radiation, like concrete. If you go behind a concrete, like in my family room, which you guys have never seen, on each side of the walls is a brick. So I can go in there and not feel it. And when it was first happening to me, I was sleeping in my bathtub, which is, of course, porcelain and stone on the walls. So if that is happening to you and your head is feeling like it's going to bust open, like somebody put you in a chambers chair and turn on electricity to sodomize you and to no end, electricity wise, get yourself to concrete, a barrier, aluminum foil. When I go out, I put aluminum foil underneath my hat. That's why lots of times I wear hats or caps. You want to try to preserve yourself because this stuff is happening, but we don't know. Like they're not going to say, "Hey, we just do a nuclear bomb." You look up and you see stuff going on, little planes and stuff, and the only thing we stuck on is, oh, that's a chemtrail. No, we need to know what's going on. We need to know what's going on.
7.2 inches or 18 centimeters will drop it to 1/8, 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, etc. 10 having thicknesses drops the total radiation exposure to 1/1024th of the level in the outside environment. For concrete, that would be 24 inches or 60 centimeters. If you can do that, people not killed by heat or kinetic energy close to ground zero can wait out the highest radiation levels. For lead, the thickness of your lead bunker would only have to be 10 centimeters or 4 inches thick.
Equivalent like lead, aluminum foil, the EMF blankets, like I have the EMF curtains. I take my phones and I put it on a slab of metal at night because I can feel it. Before I do that, I can feel it coming from even my kitchen stove when it's off. If I walk by it, I can feel it from my phone and illuminating through my computer.
If it was made of wood, however, you need a barrier 110.
Wood would not do it. It's like throwing wood into the furnace, into a fire. Let's say that the frequencies from the radiation is fire, and then you stand in front of the wood and try to block yourself. You're not blocking it. It's still penetrating right through that wood and getting to your lungs, your heart, your kidney, everything. Metal and concrete and things of that nature.
Inches thick or 2.8 meters. Right now, the risk of a nuclear confrontation from some rogue power isn't zero, but it's small. Let's hope it stays that way. This is Joel Mendy, that old Dr. Bones, wishing you the best of health in good times or bad. Thanks for watching.
So hopefully, because I know it's people out there, it's not just me. But as he spoke about the iodine sulfate, you definitely want to get some sulfate. I do have it, had it for since 2016, and the government, which is not our friend, they wanted all my information just to purchase it. They told me that I had to use a credit card and I wanted to use cash. This is it. Make sure it comes in a dark bottle, preferably brown or blue. You want to keep it covered, not in a cold place or a hot place, but neutral. You want to keep it covered. 3 drops of this in water, juice, just an ounce of juice, water, or whatever. It's not a polite taste, but it's not a bad taste either. I drop it into ginger ale or ginger juice, which ginger has its own. When I make my ginger, it has its own agents that work. And then you drop that iodine in there. Let me put it up again. And it will assist you. You will immediately feel something going on. That's because it's working. And there's some other things that, and look at the number. There's some other stuff that I got that I won't say on here because who knows, I might get a knock on the door. They don't want you to live. But you do your research. You just type in if you're exposed to radiation at the highest level, you must say at the highest level, and it will tell you what to do. If you trust a pharmacist, you go. But because I was a pharmacy technician, I knew what to do. I just was so scared when I went because that was 2014. And see, nobody knew about the pandemic, but I knew that all of this stuff was going on. I knew that it was going on, and I knew that it was something that they didn't want anybody to get a hold on. What? You trying to save yourself? Let me send your name to the government. And they badgered me so bad. I just went on. I said, listen, I'm going to save myself. They going to do what they going to do, and I'm going to save myself. So I went on and got it. And they had to order it. And then when I picked it up, went to pick it up, they call you. And I'm like, this is crazy. I went to pick it up and they want your ID and they want all of this stuff. When that's something that you can literally go to the vitamin shop if they have it on a shelf and purchase it. But that's how the government was operating. They was like, listen, we know what we about to do, and we don't want nobody saving themselves. But if you're getting them headaches and you know it's not a cold and you diarrhea and you just know that this is something that just is totally out of the ordinary, you look them symptoms up because they're going to be the same symptoms as this so-called flu, and they're going to be the same symptoms as um flu and a cold. Say, oh, I caught a sore throat from my family member. No, you need to look into it because you shouldn't be feeling faint. You shouldn't be nauseated and never throwing up. Nauseation will go for days and weeks. My grandson can vouch for it. He went through the same thing. Him and I at the same time because they was pumping it in our house so bad where you can hear I don't even know what it's called, but you can hear it chiming inside of our vents. They turned it up so high where my son was doing and I mentioned this before, my son was doing DoorDash and I called him and I said, you doing DoorDash? Come get me. And I didn't want to be out till my son would stay out to 5 or 6 in the morning to the next day. And I didn't feel anything. The moment I came to my home, that's when I felt everything. And I would be running around. It would be killing me, literally. Another thing you can do is take a white or red onion, whichever one you have, a big one, slice it in half, put it in an old sock that you're not even using, and set it in front of your door. Will it stop all the radiation? No, but you will be able to tell the difference. I have some out there right now that has been there from day one. So hopefully this was helpful to someone. If you have any questions, please respond and leave your comments right here on this particular video. And if I can answer it, I will answer it right off the back. And if I can, I'll find the answer for you. If you want to know what else that you can get to preserve your being from this radiation, I'll be glad to share that as well. Please meet me back within another 15 to 20 minutes right here. She knows it's down. As I said, when it came back up, I said she knows it's back up, but I don't know how long it's going to be back up. They took it down. I'm not worried. I'm okay with that. It ain't mine. I don't care. Listen, wherever I can get my voice heard to tell the truth and the light, that's what I'm going to do. Who is the light? Jesus, the light of the world. Meet me right back here on Psalms 121, 7 and 8. And I'm going to be sharing a story with you that happened to me so that you may continue to be encouraged. All right, I love you.